He thought he'd won, and that was the trap. June 1941, North Africa. Erwin Rommel receives the report he's been waiting for. Halfaya Pass, held, British offensive destroyed, 91 tanks lost. 10 guns, 3 days. He files the lesson carefully. Prepared fire zones plus 88s equals victory. Audacity plus killing ground equals unbeatable. He's right, for exactly 14 months. Then Alamein turns that lesson into a coffin, because the British spent those 14 months learning the same doctrine, building the same depth, preparing the same interlocking fire that Rommel had used against them here. The trap Rommel couldn't escape wasn't built by the British. It was built by Rommel himself, one victory at a time. Starting at this pass, Halfaya Pass, Egyptian-Libyan border, a natural ramp cut into a 200-meter escarpment, about 650 feet on the North African coast. One road through, one way up for armor and supply trucks. Whoever holds it controls the coast road. Whoever controls the coast road controls the war. The Germans seize it in late May 1941. And the man Rommel sends to hold it is Captain Wilhelm Bach, former Lutheran pastor from Württemberg, now a Wehrmacht officer, tasked with turning a rocky desert choke point into a killing ground. Take a moment with that biography. A man who spent years speaking about mercy is about to build the most efficient anti-tank position in North Africa. Bach has 10 88mm Flak, 32 guns, 3.5 inches of shell. In 2 weeks, he doesn't waste an hour of either. The 88 was designed to kill aircraft at 8,000 meters, nearly 5 miles up. Every manual said the same thing, pointed at the sky. But when you depress that barrel to near horizontal and fire an armor-piercing round at a tank 200 meters away, just over 300 yards, it crosses the distance in under 2 seconds and hits with enough force to punch through 84 millimeters, just over 3 inches of hardened steel. The British Matilda II, the tank the Germans themselves call invulnerable, the one their standard 37mm guns cannot scratch, has 78 millimeters, just over 3 inches, of frontal armor. 6 millimeters, barely a quarter of an inch. That's the margin between invulnerable and burning. Bach doesn't just know the math, he builds the fire corridor around it. He cuts the gun pits deep into the rock, barrels clearing the desert floor by inches. From 500 meters, those positions look like desert. No gun shield profile, no silhouette, nothing. He hammers ranging stakes at 200-meter intervals, roughly 220 yards on every approach route. His crews won't calculate under fire. They'll aim at markers they place themselves. Pre-sighted, memorized. He positions all 10 guns so their fields of fire overlap completely. Move left, another gun's arc. Move right, same result. Flank north, 2 guns positioned for exactly that angle. He doesn't build a defensive line. He builds a fire corridor with no exits. Then he tells his crews, wait, don't fire until you can see the turret markings. Rommel reviews the position before the British attack, walks the ridgeline, sees the gun pits, understands immediately what Bach has created. He approves it without hesitation, more than approves it. He absorbs it. What Bach built here doesn't just stop the British in June 1941. It gives Rommel a doctrine he will trust completely for the next 14 months. And complete trust in a doctrine, that's how you build a trap for yourself. June 15, 1941. Operation Battleaxe. Britain's attempt to relieve Tobruk and push Rommel back across the frontier. Nearly 200 British tanks, 3 columns. The northern column drives straight at Halfaya. The crews have been told the position is lightly defended. Some infantry, a few anti-tank guns. Nothing a Matilda can't handle. 3 weeks earlier, a reconnaissance report had flagged heavy gun emplacements on the ridge. It moved through the chain. The right people read it. It wasn't enough to change the plan. You're in one of those tanks now. Maximum speed 24 kilometers per hour, about 15 miles per hour. Vision through a slit 3 inches wide, about 7.5 centimeters. Your own dust obscures everything forward of 200 meters, about 220 yards. The ridge ahead looks empty. V 600 meters, just under a mile. Nothing. 200 meters, the first 88 fires. Flat crack, no arc. The round crosses 200 meters, just over 300 yards in under 2 seconds. The lead Matilda stops. Penetration through the front glacis. The 78 millimeters that stopped everything until this morning. Gone. Smoke pours from the hatches. The crew doesn't get out in time. 8 seconds later, the second round fires, then the third. The column tries to return fire. The Matilda's 2-pounder needs to close to under 600 meters, under 660 yards, to damage an in-place position. They're at, 200? Shooting at muzzle flashes that vanish in under a second, at targets below the desert floor. At coordinates they're guessing, while Bach's crews aim at stakes they place themselves. It isn't a fight. It's the fire corridor doing exactly what Bach designed it to do. By 0800 hours, 90 minutes after the first shot, 11 Matildas are burning. The pass holds. Then British bombers arrive to suppress the gun positions. The same guns that have been killing tanks tilt their barrels up and start engaging aircraft. One Hurricane goes down. The others break off. The crews go back to shooting tanks. The 88 doesn't care what it kills. Bach understood that before anyone else in this theater. Here's the radio traffic that survived. Timestamp 0623 hours. Baker 6, this is Dog 3 actual. Taking fire from 0 to 0, can't locate the guns. Repeat, cannot locate. I have 2 vehicles stopped in front of me. Request orders, over. Response came back 18 minutes later. No useful orders. Because there were no useful orders to give. That transmission is the human cost of the report nobody acted on. A man in a steel box watching the tank in front of him burn, asking for help from people who didn't know what was in those gun pits. 18 minutes of silence. 63 vehicles worth of wreckage. June 16th, the Desert Rats push from the southwest. Bach moves 3 guns overnight to alternate positions. The British scan the ridgeline for yesterday's emplacements. They're looking at empty pits. The guns are on different hills. One crew gets a Matilda to within 300 meters, barely 330 yards, of the nearest gun pit before taking a penetrating hit. They bail out, walk back through the desert, survive. The tank doesn't. 300 meters, barely 330 yards. That's how close you had to get. Nobody else gets that close. June 17th, WWII orders withdrawal. 91 tanks lost. 969 men killed, wounded, or captured. Rommel watches the pre-sighted ground hold. Watches British armor break against the prepared depth. Watches Bach's blueprint work in real time. He's taking notes. Halfaya convinces Rommel of 2 things. First, the 88 in prepared ground beats any British armor at any practical combat range. Second, audacity on offense combined with interlocking fire on defense is unbeatable. For 14 months, North Africa proves him right. That's the danger. At Gazala, his panzers cut behind the British line. The British counterattack drives into German gun screens. They lose 550 tanks in 3 weeks. Rommel takes Tobruk in a single day, at Mersa Matruh, at the First Battle of El Alamein. Every time British armor responds to his maneuver, it drives into a pre-sighted engagement zone and burns. The lesson feels confirmed again and again and again. But here's what those victories are doing to him while he's winning them. Every offensive burns panzers. Replacement requires shipping across the Mediterranean past the Royal Navy and RAF Malta. By mid-1942, his replacement rate is falling behind his loss rate. He has fewer operational tanks than he started the Gazala offensive with, despite winning every major engagement. And while his armor bleeds, something changes on the British side that Halfaya convinced him didn't need accounting for. They start learning his doctrine. Every after-action report. Every tank commander who survives a German gun screen. Every officer who studies why the armor failed and what it failed against. The British aren't just building more tanks. They're building the same defensive lattice Bach built at Halfaya, but deeper, wider, backed by an industrial base Rommel cannot match. And they're building it at El Alamein, 64 kilometers from coast to impassable salt flats, no open desert to swing through, no flank to turn, no gap to exploit. Just prepared depth, overlapping arcs, and anti-tank guns, including British 3.7-inch anti-aircraft weapons now dug in, depressed to near horizontal, aimed at the approaches Rommel has to use. The British have built Halfaya Pass on ground Rommel cannot go around. When he attacks at Alam Halfa in August 1942, his last offensive thrust, his panzers drive into exactly the kind of pre-sighted killing ground that Bach built 14 months earlier. He loses 50 tanks in 4 days. He withdraws. He never attacks again. El Alamein opens October 23, 1942. Montgomery's plan isn't mobile warfare. It's industrial attrition. Deliberate, grinding. A weight of artillery and armor that doesn't find gaps. It manufactures them by destroying everything in its path. Rommel is fighting maneuver against material. Trying to apply the lesson of Halfaya against an army that has built the same doctrine on a scale his supply lines cannot answer. By November 4th, his Panzer strength, 249 operational tanks at the battle's opening, is reduced to 36, against 800 British armor still in the field. He retreats. 2,000 kilometers, nearly 1,250 miles. The entire distance advanced in 18 months of desert war, reversed in weeks. The doctrine that won at Halfaya couldn't win at El Alamein, because the British had built it bigger, deeper, and with everything behind it that Rommel's overstretched Mediterranean supply line could never deliver. Halfaya worked too well. It convinced Rommel the answer was permanent. El Alamein proved the answer was available to both sides. And the side with more factories, more fuel, more ships, and more time to prepare was always going to build it larger than Rommel could answer. Bach holds Halfaya through the summer, through 45 degrees Celsius heat, 113 Fahrenheit, through the artillery that can't quite reach his deeply dug positions. When Operation Crusader launches in November 1941, it doesn't try to take Halfaya frontally. It goes around it, cuts the garrison off, leaves Bach and his men isolated on the ridge. They hold anyway. Through December, through Christmas, into 1942, rationed to starvation out of medicine. The men who held the pass against 200 British tanks in June wait in those same pits for food that isn't coming. January 17, 1942, 7 months after Battleaxe, Bach surrenders what remains, roughly 5,500 men. Not to military defeat, to hunger. They held until there was nothing left to hold with. Bach walks into captivity. After the war, he returns to Württemberg, returns to the church, dies in 1952. The gun pits he cut into the rock of Halfaya remain. There's a letter he wrote in July 1941, intercepted by British intelligence, declassified in 1985. One line: "The enemy kept coming, even when they saw the others burning. Brave men." Wrong plan. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a former pastor watching brave men die for a plan that didn't account for what was waiting. Brave men. Wrong plan. That's Halfaya in June 1941. It's also El Alamein in October 1942, except by then the brave men are German. The wrong plan is Rommel's, and the killing ground was built by the army that learned the lesson at Halfaya and spent 14 months making it impossible to escape. The pass is still there. Salem, Egypt, the escarpment, the switchback road. Bach's gun pits still visible in the rock if you know where to look. Concrete, steel, 8 decades of sand filling the excavations. The overlapping arcs he calculated are still written into the terrain. The ground doesn't forget what it was built for. Rommel drove past Halfaya twice. West to east when he was advancing. East to west when he was retreating. He never stopped to look. Maybe because looking would have meant understanding something he couldn't afford to understand. That the victory he filed in June 1941 was also, quietly, simultaneously, the first wall of the trap that closed around him at El Alamein 14 months later. 10 guns, 3 days, 60 Panzers worth of a lesson paid in British armor in 1941, paid back in German armor in 1942. The trap Rommel couldn't escape wasn't at Halfaya. It was everything Halfaya taught him to believe. If you want more stories where tactics, terrain, and human decisions collide like this, subscribe. Because the Desert War wasn't won by statistics on a map. It was won and lost by the lessons commanders chose to learn, and the ones they carried too far. If your family has a connection to the Western Desert, either side of that ridge, either end of that war, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. Next time, the siege those tanks were trying to relieve. Tobruk, 1941. 8 months, 35,000 men. The fortress Rommel couldn't crack. The escarpment watches the coast road. Still pointing west, still waiting.